So I want to check in with you. Which is the correct answer? So what will a good response to the WPA or a good response to your final? What will it do? Which one of these? Who said A? It will clearly and concisely summarize information in the article. No. Okay, that's right. Did anyone say B? Synthesize the content of the article with your own life experiences and other ideas you have encountered in your academic career. No, it will not do that. How about C? Analyze and evaluate how persuasive an article's rhetorical strategies are for convincing the intended audience of its arguments. All right. Anyone? So, Turkey, you say C. Anyone else?
C.
C? Okay. Not D, the article's main idea, and explain it with support, why you agree or disagree. Okay, yeah, no, not D. Parts of these you will, so yes, the correct answer is C. So that means, like, you're thinking about, like, why the arguments, parts of some of these answers, like, you will need to, like, know information. So, like, being able to summarize is a good skill, but you won't give that information. Knowing the article's main idea is important, but you don't give your opinion about the main idea. So that means you are going to analyze and evaluate how persuasive an article's rhetorical strategies are for convincing the intended audience of its arguments. So how is this different from the reading and writing we've been doing for our papers? So think about, like, we've been writing paper 3, 2, and 1 also. A lot of those, like, have we been analyzing how well the article is written or how convincing it is? No. You've had to do that process while you're reading the article, but that's not what you do in your writing. What have you been doing in your writing? Anyone? So, if in case it feels like paper 2 feels like a million years ago and it's hard to think about paper 3, I just want to look at, like, these slides from February 14th and when we kind of looked at and thought about, like, okay, the differences between these papers. So you mostly, with the papers we've been doing, it's writing for your reader, giving them information about a topic that has a lot of parts. Right now, you want to demonstrate that you can read like a writer. There's kind of a comparison right here if you want to go over it. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but the link's in there so you can do that. So let's think about, we know that the semester and the midterm are different, so there's some similarities, but they're not, you're getting the WPA prompt, you're analyzing an article, but the duration of the exam is different, the article topic is different, so you had CSR first one, now it's news media, so it's not a brand new topic, but it is going to be a brand new article. With this one, we read and studied it in class, so you're really focusing on the writing process. Here, it's a brand new article, so you're focusing on the reading and the writing process. This was an introduction to the WPA. This simulates the WPA. So what you're going to come and do in your final is going to be hopefully almost identical to what you're going to do if you take the WPA. So think about how you can prep. It's going to be good to know the prompt really well, which means come with a basic outline for the paper in your head and what rhetorical devices you'll place in each paragraph, reviewing the testing rules, and using the resources that you already have available. So this is the WPA prompt in case you've kind of forgotten it. I'm thinking about, I had you annotate for 4 things. So what were the 4 things I had you annotate for? You remember?
The idea.
Idea, so the argument. So argument. Assumptions, yeah, arguments, assumptions. Strategies, yep. And context. Okay, so here we've got argument, strategies, and assumptions. So why am I asking you to... sorry, I just want to why am I asking you to like annotate for the context? Why would I do that if it's not in the prompt?
Should be predicted.
Yeah, so you have to think about the audience. Like the audience, you have to think about like if I am the intended audience, what do I think about this? So you have to understand that when you're because it's so important to think about like what is the intended audience thinking as they're reading this. How is this written to be for them? So I just want to mention also what you'll receive on test day is an article with the prompt. You'll receive some basic information as well as paper to write with. So again, these slides will be online. So what you'll need to do during the test is you'll need to read and plan, like outline, write, and edit. So how much time do you think you should spend on these three things? You have 2 hours, 120 minutes.
2 minutes like for reading.
15 minutes to read and plan? Okay. How much do you think, so who else has some like ideas about how long to read and plan? So yeah, let's just start with that. Turkey says 15 minutes. What do other people say? An hour? What do you say? 50 minutes? Okay. Yeah, I mean, you need to find what works for you. So if you can do it in 15 minutes, that's great. The recommendation that I have is 50 minutes because that still gives you an hour and 10 minutes to write. So the recommendation is read and plan for 50 minutes, write for 50 minutes, edit for 20 minutes. Again, this is not required. I'm not like, if you start writing like 30 minutes in, I'm not gonna be like, hey, stop that. Like you get to plan how you do it. So we are going to be doing this reading. We're going to be thinking about reading and planning today. So again, this is the WPA prompt. We're going to annotate for the context, author's arguments, strategies, assumptions. And then once we get this information, I'm going to show us how we can write with it. So what I want to do is think about these different things. So let's look at these different, I'm going to pass out these papers so that you have some information about, you can take some notes about how to do the writing for, do the reading for these different parts. So, first part is we want to think about the context. So, what is the context? So we can, and I'm going to be referring to, oh, I have to pull this up. Give me a sec. Okay, yeah, there we go. So here, these are the annotations that my colleague did. So I'm stealing her work so that we can kind of learn. So what do we need from, what do we need from the context? When we're making notes about context, what information do we need to take into consideration?
Author.
Author, yep. What else? We can still see it over here.
Audience.
Audience. And what else?
Larger.
Yeah. So it's this larger conversation because I think, you know, one thing I'm thinking about is I have this paper right here which says that SDSU responds to racist Snapchat sent to student. So this is, I think, you know, this is not good. Like a racist Snapchat is especially bad no matter what. But considering that, you know, the Black Student Center, the BRC, has received 3 different vandalizations within the past, couple with this semester, it feels especially charged. So we need to think about like what else is happening that's connected to this. So, give me a sec. Why is it important to know this information? So you can understand what the you know, like, understand who wants to read this, understand why it's important. So like if we weren't to have had, you know, these incidents at the BRC, the Black Resource Center, the past few months, like I don't think this would be as scary of a thing for black students at San Diego State. But because we have had these incidents, it's much more important to address it and respond to it. That's why it's front page news in the Daily Aztec. Also, when you're writing, you're thinking about, like, the main point is you want to think, how convincing is this for the audience? So, convincing. How convincing is this for the audience? So you need to figure out who the audience is. So how do you annotate for this? Any thoughts? So one thing is, you know, to kind of get some of these ideas, you need to look at the publishing information. So look at the publishing information. And so that means like the title, or the author, publication date, or the date it was published. So like what the like publisher is. So like, is it New York Times? Who is it? So publisher. So you need to get this publishing information. And then also look at the title. And think about like, what can you learn about like who the audience is? What's this main point? So it can give you information about the audience in the larger conversation. All right, so this is what we have so far. So when you're doing the context, like take a few minutes, figure out, you know, who wrote this, like who are they trying to write it for, you know, why is this important? Because you will need it when you're writing. Okay, so any questions about this? All right, the next thing I want to think about is the author's argument. So what is the author's argument? Can you think of a synonym? What's that?
Like the social media wasn't like that's impossible, it's like people.
Or you think the Parker article?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you say what that was again?
I think it's like it's not, don't like blame the social media, it was like people who like people who has like more power.
Yeah. So the way you would, so yeah, that's good that's like the Parker argument, and it's going to be like the main idea that the author wants you to understand. So main idea. So what the author wants you to know. So like if you don't remember like the details or anything about the article, that's okay. What do they want you to know like 10 years from now? Like you could say, oh yeah, I read this article. What do you think they want you to remember, know and remember? Why is it important to figure out the main idea? I mean, that's a big part of like the prompt, so you have to write it as part of your response. But anything else?
It was all the article about that.
Sorry?
You build all the articles about the main idea?
You'll build the articles, or are you trying to say like...
The articles that you read, it's built to know that idea, so...
Yeah, it's good to know that idea, and also so you can kind of think about like, because the next part is going to be strategies. So like, what are you trying to do? Like the next step is figuring out the strategies. So you have to figure out what is the author trying to support. So like think about like, or the connection between strategies and main idea. So think about what will the author want to support. Okay, so how can you annotate it? Any ideas? So one thing that they said in the videos to find the author's main idea is look at the title. It won't give you all the details, but it will, if you can explain the title, like after reading the article, that's going to be like kind of your main idea. So a big part is like looking at the title. It'll give you more information. Then what are you going to, what else? Any other ideas?
The introduction is going to be there.
Yeah, usually a lot of times the introduction, sometimes they use that as like their attention getter. But if you think about, wait, what are they trying to do with these details? So think about kind of like the bigger takeaways as opposed to the examples, because the examples are going to be your evidence, your support, your strategies. So think about like the bigger summaries. So yeah, look at the introduction. Think about...
And also like conclusion.
Yeah, I think so. The introduction and the conclusion usually have these like the really important parts that like if you just read those, you can usually get a general idea of the article, whereas like maybe if you jump in right in the middle, it might be a little messy or unclear what that means. So you're going to look at the introduction and the conclusion. Also think about like, you know, try to identify the summaries that like explain examples. So you'll have your quotes, you'll have your statistics. Those are going to be your strategies that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And what your summaries, those are going to be things like the sub-arguments or help kind of contribute to the main argument. So I want to, any questions about that? So we've got these different types of thinking when we're thinking about like with the argument versus the strategies. And I want to like if we're thinking about, I'm going to show it right here. There's this little pyramid. I love this pyramid. So I'll go ahead and copy it right here. So what type of thinking, like, do you think we're going to be doing when or what type of ideas are we looking for? Are we looking for like kind of knowledge or comprehension, or are we looking for like synthesis, analysis?
Analysis.
Yeah, these ideas that are more analysis or synthesis, those are going to be the things that you kind of look for when you're looking for the argument. How about when we're looking for strategies? What are we looking for? Or what are they? Yeah, so we've got ethos, pathos, and logos. So we got ethos, pathos, and logos. I'll go ahead and this will be online, so if you don't get everything, that's okay. So you can go back and take notes. But yeah, we've got the ethos, pathos, and logos. Which one is ethos? Credibility, yeah. So that's Let me just make sure. Yeah, it's going to be the credibility, fair-minded presentation. So which one's pathos? Emotion, yeah. And then logos? Logic, yeah. So I'm going to copy information that I stole from myself. So that it's going to go on here. That I just got it from the slides, the February 14th slides. So we've got ethos, pathos, and logos. Why are they important? Why do we need to like annotate for these?
Like appeal like the way he can like convince you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you need to one, it's asked for you, and also like what's gonna like you need to think again about the like connection between the argument and the strategies. So strategies, connection. So yeah, you're thinking about this. How do these support what the author wants to say? All right, so that's like it's important, you know, because you have to write. That's what the prompt asks, but also like you're thinking about like how do these help the author? What are some like when you're reading? What are some things you can be thinking so that you find these strategies?
His example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so look for the examples. So again, like, you know, when we're looking at the triangle, like you're probably going to find things that are more at the bottom that don't have the analysis, that don't have the big takeaways. So examples, what are kind of the examples you might find that are going to like fall, you know, maybe fall well into these categories or maybe not? Yeah, so you can find statistics. Yeah, you can find experts. So if they quote an expert or like a you know, university or something. Also, you can think about like, am I having like a reaction to this? Like, am I like, do I feel like, whoa, that's terrible, or oh, that's interesting? So like, am I having like, you can think about like if you're having an emotional reaction. So if you have something that like makes you like stop, then you can say like, okay, this might be like one of the strategies because they're making me think something. So yeah, find these examples. You don't have to, you're going to be only listing 2 strategies, so you don't have to give everything that you annotate, but finding the stronger examples is going to be helpful. All right. The last one I think is kind of the most difficult. Because with these, with the context, and then also especially with the strategies and the argument, you're looking at what does the author say. But with assumptions, you're looking at what does the author not say. And that's kind of harder to pinpoint because it's hard to think about, well, what are they not saying? It's easier to point at what they are saying. So, in assumptions, you want to think about like, kind of like ideologies. You don't want to think about like facts or things like that, but ideologies, ways of thinking. So like, if we're reading the Parker article and someone says like, oh, they assume like, you know, people, or they assume like, I don't know, people use social media. And it's like, not really. They think about, not really so much facts, but more these ways of thinking, these ideologies, these collective thoughts. So some of the notes I have from watching the videos from the WPA website is asking this question: what does the author assume the audience knows or believes? What's the author assume? So what is the audience? So what does the author assume the audience knows or believes? Why? I'm going to ask why these are important in a sec. But first, I want to think about, annotating for them and looking at the Parker article. Another thing is, what's another way to kind of think about assumptions? Any ideas? Yeah.
What does the author means or wants to send the message behind his article?
So,
or the hidden message?
That's kind of connected because, it's what he's not saying, but he's thinking like, what are the opinions that they already come with? Like, I'm looking at this, like, SDSU responds to racist Snapchat sent to students. That's kind of thinking like, we already believe like that's not cool to send like racist Snapchats to students. It's kind of profiling this as, a really terrible incident and kind of believes like, these types of steps. Some people think like, oh, freedom of speech, like I can do what I want. But I think, when they're in their audience, I actually haven't read it, so don't quote me on that. But like in their audience, they think like, okay, we agree that this is not okay. So it's something like maybe something that, they kind of get, but it's something they maybe already come with. So like, and it like the article pulls that idea out of them. It has that foundation already because it doesn't need to state it. So it's kind of like the hidden messages. I'm going to go ahead and actually put that right here. So like hidden messages, ideas the audience comes with. So one thing that I want to think about is how to annotate for them. So last week I was talking about when you're writing your paper, you're using this critical thinking. You're trying to prevent anyone from saying, "Excuse me, what about this?" Try to think of it like you're gonna have to post this on Facebook, and then your teacher or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, but you're going to post it on social media, and then your teacher is going to be the meanest, commenter ever, and is going to try and pick apart what you're saying. That idea, I think, is going to help here because what you want to think about, what I think helps is you can think what would a skeptic, someone who's not in the audience, think? How is that different from what the intended audience would think? So, someone who is not a member of the audience. Like I said, maybe there's someone who thinks, oh, this isn't terrible. It's just people goofing around on social media. So that might be, kind of part of the, that could be the skeptic, the person that the article's not intended for. So, I'm going to go through an example with this that's going to kind of help us flesh out our assumptions, this assumption slide. So I'm going to, oops, that's not it. Give me just a sec. Actually, is it right here? Oh, no, that's not it. Give me just one sec. Didn't get downloaded. Okay, so give me just one sec. Okay, so let's look at the assumptions. So one of the assumptions from the Parker article is, I want to look at this one that my colleague picked out, which is this assumption that there's a general dumbing down of the national conversation. So I think, this is kind of one of those assumptions that, like, people would say, you know what, Trump got elected, there's fake news, things are just going crazy. Do you think everyone in America thinks that? No. What would a skeptic say to this? What would a Trump voter say to this? He deserves it? Yeah, we're like, we were going down, now we're going to be going back up. Like, things were, so, you can kind of think about, like, if you take this question of what would a skeptic think? They would think, like, things are getting better. We had a rough patch there of, like, where we had a president I didn't like who did things I didn't like, but now we have a president that, so now things are getting better. But so what they're responding to is the assumption that the audience thinks things are getting worse and, like, there's this dumbing down. So the thing is, you're not going to be putting, it's good to think about this. Think about, like, things are getting better, because you're going to be writing about the assumption that things are getting worse and there's a dumbing down of the national conversation, I think is the language that they use, that the Parker uses. So it's good. Think about, like, the skeptic, because you're going to want to try and address the skeptic. Yeah.
So, like, for the writing, like, direct PAs, for the assumptions, is it better to, like, just write about both sides of, like, skeptic and both sides of the...
So you're going to use this, like, it's good to use, like, the skeptic side, because what you want to say is, like, you're going to talk about how strong the article is. And you're going to say, you know what, this article assumes this, but for, like, a random reader, that might not be very helpful, because they think this thing, things are getting better. So when you initially write about the assumptions, you want to present this, the assumption that the audience has. But you still want to engage what the skeptic thinks, because you're going to say, like, whether or not that assumption is too strong to be a convincing, like, to be a convincing argument, to be a convincing article. No, that's a good question. Thank you. But yeah, you definitely, like, this is the most important part, this assumption. This is also important, but this is the most important part. So again, think about, like, if you're having a Twitter war or, like, some argument online, if people are gonna, like, if you were to read the comments section of an article, what would people say? Because this is what the audience thinks. Any questions about that? So yeah.
So that assumption, do we have to take, like, some some quotation from the article, or doesn't have to?
It doesn't have to be a quotation. You should be able to point to the text, like not that you'll be able to, but you should be able to like point like this is where I got this idea.
Okay.
So that's going to be part of it. Yeah. So what I think is like if you're annotating, like, you know, think about what would a skeptic think? How is that different from what the intended audience would think? So the assumptions are what the intended audience would think. They don't have to make any effort to persuade them. The author doesn't have to make any effort to persuade them to think this. All right, yeah. You have a question?
How is the second assumption is different from the first assumption?
Here. So, what would a skeptic think? So, this, because what you really want is you want to think about like what the intended audience already thinks, and I think the best way to say that, the best way to find like what the audience thinks is going to be what do they already know? Because it'd be hard for me to like say like, you know, like kind of give this background that like isn't stated. So the best way to kind of pull that out, the best way to pull out what's not said is to get the critics to like poke at these ideas. So for instance, maybe like someone, I don't know what they say about teachers in the koala, but like if someone says like, you know, I'm thinking like, oh, Amanda's a terrible and boring teacher or something like that, like I might respond, or maybe another student here would respond with saying like, yeah, classes are a little boring, but that's because we need to learn. And that, like these students, like the student who posts that, they assume like the best quality of a class is whether or not you're having fun. Like, whereas the other one thinks like the best quality is how much you're learning. So the one who's posting says like, yeah, Amanda sucks, she's not interesting, something like that. Like, you know, I'm not having fun, I'm not, you know, telling jokes or something. I'm not laughing, like things like that. So they assume, like their assumption is the best quality of a class is it's fun. I just have to come, or I get an A, and it's great.
And it's like it's also like to the like rate my professor. Do you know that rate my professor?
Yes, I do.
I think people who write there is like people who get like bad grades.
A lot of times,
I mean,
yeah.
I understand that, but
yeah. So that's what you have. That's kind of some of the things that's important to think about when you're reading some of those Rate My Professors, and that's, you know, some of the critical thinking we want to give you. So yeah, that may be like their assumption is like an easy A is the best thing, but maybe someone who's like, I really want to like learn and have my thinking challenged, you know, maybe Rate My Professor can be a good way if you have good entries, but not always. Any other questions about this? Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to think about like if you were writing if you were writing the Parker article, you would not have to put like there's a lot of information about the context and the argument. You don't have to put everything, but you should put a little information about the context. You should put a little bit of the author's argument, or like you need to have, how many arguments, do you remember? Or wait, how many strategies? Two strategies, yeah. And then the argument is just going to be the general overall kind of takeaway. So if I were doing this, what I'm going to do right now is I want everyone to be in their the different articles that they had. So I'm going to go ahead and break up